Hey everyone, today we're stepping onto the vibrant yet volatile streets of New York City's Upper West Side in the 1950s, with a musical where Shakespeare's timeless tragedy collides with the simmering tensions of street gangs and forbidden love. Welcome to West Side Story. West Side Story is a musical conceived by Jerome Robbins with music by Leonard Bernstein and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim with a book by Arthur Lawrence. The plot of the musical is basically taking the story of Romeo and Juliet, but giving it a 50s makeover in blue-collar Manhattan, swapping swords for switchblades on the vibrant Upper West Side. The musical explores the rivalry between the Jets and the Sharks. The Sharks, who are recent migrants from Puerto Rico, and the Jets, who are white, vie for dominance of the neighborhood. The dark themes, sophisticated music, extended dance scenes, tragic love story, all focus on social problems marked a turning point in musical theater. In 1949, Jerome Robbins approached Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence about collaborating on a contemporary musical adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. He proposed that the plot focus on the conflict between an Irish Catholic family and a Jewish family living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan during the Easter Passover season. Eager to write his first musical, Lawrence immediately agreed. Robbins and Lawrence described the project as lyric theater, and Lawrence wrote a first draft he called East Side Story. Only after he completed it did the group realize it was little more than a musicalization of themes that had already been covered in plays like Abbey's Irish Rose. In 1955, theatrical producer Martin Gable was working on a stage adaptation of the James M. Cain novel Serenade about an opera singer who comes to the realization he is homosexual, and he invited Lawrence to write the book. Now, Lawrence accepted and suggested Bernstein and Robbins join the creative team. Robbins felt if the three were going to join forces, they should return to East Side Story, and Bernstein agreed. Now, Lawrence was soon hired to write the screenplay for a remake of the 1934 Greta Garbo film, The Painted Veil, for Ava Gardner. While in Hollywood, he contacted Bernstein, who ironically was in town conducting at the Hollywood Bowl. Now, this would be where the early drafts of West Side Story would begin to take shape. The two men met at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and the conversation turned to juvenile delinquent gangs, a fairly recent social phenomenon that had received major coverage on the front pages of the morning newspapers due to a Chicano turf war. Now, a Chicano turf war is basically a heated feud between Mexican Americans who embraced their Mexican native ancestry and, of course, the whites. Now, Bernstein suggested they rework East Side Story and set it in L.A., but Lawrence felt he was more familiar with Puerto Ricans in the United States and Harlem than he was with Mexican Americans and Olvera Street, aka it's called Calle Olvera, which is a historic street in El Pueblo de Los Angeles, which is basically the historic center of LA. The two contacted Robbins, who was enthusiastic about a musical with a Latin beat. He arrived in Hollywood to choreograph the dance sequences for the 1956 film The King and I, and he and Lawrence began developing the musical. Now, fun fact, when the producer of The Painted Veil replaced Ava Gardner with Eleanor Parker, he asked Lawrence to revise his script with her in mind. Lawrence completely backed out of the film, freeing him to devote all his time to East Side Story. To basically fast forward, so Lawrence went to an opening night party for a new play by Ugo Betti, basically an Italian judge turned author who is considered to be one of the greatest Italian playwrights. So in New York City, Lawrence met up with Stephen Sondheim, who had heard that East Side Story was back on track. This time, however, with a new title change, simply West Side Story. Bernstein had decided he needed to concentrate solely on the music, asking Sondheim if he would be interested in tackling the task. Once he accepted, Lawrence went to work on rewriting a new draft of the book, completely changing the characters' backgrounds. So the male lead, once an Irish American, was now of Polish and Irish descent, and the female lead had become Puerto Rican. The language in the musical posed another problem. So profanity was uncommon in the theater at the time, and slang expressions were avoided in fear that they would be dated by the time the production opened. So Lawrence ultimately invented what sounded like real street talk, but actually wasn't. Sondheim went to work converting long passages of dialogue into lyrics. Basically, the song One Hand, One Heart was moved from the balcony scene to the scene set in the bridal shop, ultimately writing what would be considered a pivotal turning point in the musical, the beautiful duet Tonight, which basically encapsulating the intensity of Tony and Maria's love for each other, conveying their hopes and dreams for a better future. Now, Lawrence felt that the lyrics to America and I Feel Pretty were too witty for the characters singing them, but they stayed in the score and proved to be not only audience favorites, but I Feel Pretty remains one of the most famous songs, which is basically about Maria telling her friends about her newfound love and also contributing to West Side Story being the highest grossing film of 1961. Sondheim convinced Hal Prince, who was in Boston overseeing the out-of-town tryout of a new George Abbott musical, to direct West Side Story. Prince began cutting the budget and instead raising money for the show. He started with an 8-week dance rehearsal period, which is basically cutting the traditional 4 weeks because there was to be more dancing in West Side Story than in any previous Broadway show. Originally, when considering the cast, Lawrence wanted James Dean for the lead role of Tony. Only after the actor's sudden death, Sondheim found Larry Kert and Chita Rivera, who would create the roles of Tony and Anita. Throughout the rehearsal period, not only were the New York newspapers filled with articles about gang warfare, but Robbins kept the cast members playing the Sharks and the Jets separate in order to discourage them from socializing with each other, and reminded everyone of the reality of gang violence by posting news stories on the bulletin board backstage. After turning point for the show came when Robbins wanted a gritty realism from his sneaker and jeans-clad cast. He gave the ensemble more freedom than Broadway dancers had previously been given to interpret their roles. Now, the pre-Broadway run in Washington, D.C. was a critical and commercial success. The original Broadway production opened at the Winter Garden Theater in September of 1957, running for 732 performances, and starring American actor, singer, dancer Larry Kert, Carol Lawrence, Chicago's original Velma Kelly, Chita Rivera, and David Winters. A national tour would launch in July of 1959, returning to the Winter Garden in April of 1960 for 249 performances. In 1961, the musical would open at Her Majesty's Theater, running for 1,039 performances, starring American actor, dancer, and singer Dawn McKay, and reprising her role as Anita, Chita Rivera. The production transferred to the Shaftesbury Theater in December of 1974, starring television personality Lionel Morton and Christiana Matthews. In 1961, United Artists would release a film adaptation starring Natalie Wood, Rita Moreno, and George Chakiris. The film would be nominated for 11 Academy Awards, winning 10, including Best Picture. The film was designated as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry in 1997. Now, a second film adaptation directed by Steven Spielberg was released in December of 2021 and receiving 7 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, but ultimately winning an Oscar for Ariana DeBose's performance of Anita. Broadway would see its first revival in February of 1980 at the Minskoff Theater, running for 333 performances. The production starred Ken Marshall, Puerto Rican actress and singer Josie de Guzman, and former member of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, Debbie Allen. A UK national tour commenced in 1997, starring David Habin from the pop opera band Amici Forever, and singer, dancer, and actress Anna Jane Casey. The production would transfer to the Prince Edward Theatre in October of 1998, and transferring to the Prince of Wales Theatre until it closed in January of 2000. Now, West Side Story was revived at the Curve Theatre in November of 2019, starring Moulin Rouge's Christian Jamie Moscato. 2009 would see Broadway's second revival at the Palace Theatre, weaving Spanish lyrics into the English libretto. The show starred Movin' Out's Matthew Cavanaugh, Argentinian actress and singer Josefina Scaglione, and Moulin Rouge's original sparkling diamond, Satine, Karen Olivo. The 2009 cast recording won the Grammy Award for Best Musical Show Album, with the show selling over $1 million in ticket sales over the course of nearly 2 years. Now, a third Broadway revival opened in February of 2020 at the Broadway Theater. The production actually cut the song I Feel Pretty and trimmed the book to 1 hour and 45 minutes with no intermission. The setting was loosely updated to the present, as well as replacing the original balletic, finger-snapping choreography with swaggering hip-hop and Latin-influenced dancing. The set consisted mostly of large screens featuring video, several cast members carrying iPhones, and the Jets were a mix of Caucasian and other ethnicities. However, March 11th, 2020 was the show's last performance before production was suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The production would never reopen, with its run lasting only 24 performances. Now, West Side Story continues to captivate audiences worldwide. Its themes of prejudice, love, and loss are as relevant today as they were in the 1950s. It's a musical that challenges us to break down barriers, embrace diversity, and fight for a world where love can blossom even in the most unlikely of places. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to today's video. If you enjoyed this, please comment on what you liked or disliked. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to see other videos like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. And until next time, that's a wrap.